When I arrived at work, the security guard said, "You already came in today, didn't you?" But I had been home all day, and on the camera footage, I saw something. A woman in my coat. Her face was hidden by a scarf. I decided to find out who she was, and was stunned. I'm glad you're here with me. Please listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I used to think my life was predictable in the best possible way, the kind of steady rhythm you only appreciate after 50. Quiet mornings, a reliable job, the comfort of familiar routines. During the week, I left my house in a quiet suburb north of Boston at the same time every day, carrying the same tote bag with my lunch and the same thermos of tea. I liked order. I liked knowing who I was. I worked in an administrative position at a mid-sized architecture firm, close enough to creative energy to feel inspired, far enough from real pressure to stay invisible when I wanted. My coworkers saw me as dependable, a bit private, maybe overly punctual. I never minded that reputation. At 61, I'd earned the right to move at my own pace. My days were filled with small, comforting rituals. I watered my plants before leaving the house. I straightened the stack of mail on the counter. I double-checked the stove even when I knew I hadn't used it. I kept to routines, not because I feared chaos, but because they helped me think. They made me feel steady. But looking back, I should have noticed the first tremors long before the day everything cracked. The first odd moment came on a Tuesday morning in early March. I'd stopped by my neighborhood pharmacy after work, picking up a refill and a few groceries. When I got to the checkout, the cashier, a young man with an eager smile, said, "Back again? Forget something?" I chuckled politely. "No, I haven't been here today." He blinked, confused. "You were just here." Bought a pack of gum and a magazine. I shrugged it off. I assumed he'd mistaken me for some other middle-aged woman with light hair and a practical coat. It wasn't worth correcting. I left the store thinking nothing of it, though the comment stayed in the back of my mind like a tiny pebble in a shoe. The second odd moment came 2 days later, when my neighbor, Mrs. Halpern, waved at me from across the street. "You must have dropped this earlier," she called, holding up a scarf I didn't recognize. A deep burgundy knit, too long and too heavy for my taste. I walked over, frowning. "I don't think that's mine." She insisted otherwise. "You were wearing it this morning. You said you found it in your closet and didn't remember buying it." My stomach tightened, though I forced a smile. "That wasn't me, I promise." She looked embarrassed and apologized, and I thanked her anyway. But as I walked back into my house, I felt something cold slide behind my ribs. Why were people so sure they'd seen me? Still, I rationalized. People misremembered things. People conflated faces. And I had lived here for over 10 years. Maybe my presence blended into the landscape so thoroughly that any woman my age became me in their minds. But then came Friday. I had worked from home the entire day, finishing reports that didn't require in-office access. At 4 p.m., I decided to swing by the office anyway to leave a few documents on my manager's desk. It was a small courtesy, something I did often. The building was only a 15-minute drive away. The parking lot was half empty when I pulled in. I was tired and slightly irritated with myself for not taking a proper day off. My joints ached from sitting too long. I remember thinking about dinner, whether I'd bother cooking or just warm up leftover soup. I walked toward the glass doors. The late afternoon sun made the lobby look unusually bright. Our security guard, Carl, stood behind the desk, flipping through a clipboard. He looked up, startled. "Oh, you're back." I froze mid-step. "Back?" He tilted his head. "You already came in this morning around 9, didn't you?" My pulse crawled into my throat. "Carl, I was home all day." He gave an awkward laugh. "Come on, I checked you in myself." I shook my head slowly. "You didn't. I wasn't here." Something uneasy flickered in his eyes. He glanced at the sign-in sheet, then at me, then back again. "Let me show you," he said. He led me around the desk to the monitor displaying the morning's security footage. The timestamp read 09 to 03. The lobby looked exactly the same. Same brightness, same polished tile floor. A woman entered through the main doors. She wore my gray wool coat. My coat. The one with the missing top button and the faint stain on the right sleeve from when I'd spilled coffee last winter. She moved confidently, like she belonged there, but her face was obscured by a thick scarf wrapped high under her eyes. She kept her head low as she approached the desk. Carl greeted her. She nodded and walked past the camera toward the elevators. I felt the air leave my lungs. "That's not me," I whispered. Carl looked again at the screen, then at me, this time more carefully, as if trying to compare us feature by feature. "Well, she had your coat," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied, my voice thinner than I intended. "I see that." "But if that wasn't you—" He frowned. "Why would someone be wearing your coat?" I didn't answer. How could I? My mind had started spinning with questions I couldn't form out loud. Did someone steal it? But it had been hanging in my closet all week. Had someone bought the same one? But what were the odds of matching the missing button and the stain? Why hide her face? Why come here, of all places, pretending to be me? A tremor ran through my chest. I felt exposed, as if my identity were no longer entirely my own. Carl cleared his throat. "Do you want me to pull the other footage? The elevators, maybe?" "Maybe later," I said. I just need a moment." I stepped back from the monitor. The lobby felt colder than before. I wrapped my arms around myself without meaning to. Was this just some bizarre coincidence? A stranger with similar taste in outerwear? A misunderstanding piling on top of another misunderstanding? Or had someone intentionally chosen my coat, or one identical to it? Someone who wanted to move through my world unnoticed. I left the building with a strange heaviness behind my ribs. Every shadow on the pavement felt sharper. Every passing face felt too observant. I told myself not to overreact, not yet. But as I unlocked my car door, one question struck like a needle. What if she wasn't just wearing my coat? What if she was wearing my life? I drove home that evening with a knot in my stomach that tightened every time I replayed the footage in my mind. The woman in my coat moved with a kind of certainty that felt intimate, almost practiced. She hadn't hesitated at the door, hadn't fumbled with the sign-in sheet, hadn't behaved like a stranger. She behaved like someone who knew the routine, someone who knew me. At home, the stillness of my kitchen felt foreign. My plants sat silently on the windowsill. The mail was stacked exactly where I'd left it. Everything was in its place. Yet I felt displaced from my own life, as if someone had reached in and tilted the frame just enough to disturb the picture. I opened my front closet. My coat hung exactly where it always did. The missing button was still missing. The coffee stain still faintly visible. I touched the fabric, half expecting it to feel wrong somehow, as if the imposter's presence had altered it. But it was just my coat, which made everything more unsettling. I checked my bags next. My work tote, my purse. Nothing missing. Nothing added. Nothing that could explain why someone else had worn something identical to what I owned. And if it wasn't identical, if it was actually my coat, when could anyone have taken it? I rarely left it anywhere unattended. The questions circled until I felt dizzy. I barely slept that night. My mind kept latching onto details I couldn't quite grasp. Mrs. Halpern's confusion, the cashier's mistaken greeting, the scarf that wasn't mine. A pattern was forming, but I couldn't name it yet. In the morning, I returned to work, hoping the normalcy of the office might ground me. Instead, the moment I walked into the hallway, I saw the first consequence. My manager, Denise, stepped out of her office with a cautious smile. "Morning. Feeling better today?" I blinked. "Better?" She looked momentarily surprised. "You seemed off yesterday." She hesitated before adding, "When you came in during the morning." A cold wave rushed through me. "Denise, I wasn't here yesterday morning." She tilted her head skeptically. "Carl said you checked in. We all assumed, well..." She let the rest trail off. I hated that look, the one people give when they decide you're confused but don't want to say so. "I was home all day," I repeated more firmly. Denise nodded slowly, the way someone nods to avoid conflict rather than because they believe you. "If you say so. But if anything's going on, health-wise or otherwise, let me know. We can adjust your workload. Health-wise." The implication was unmistakable. Someone pretending to be me wasn't just invading my routine, they were eroding my credibility. Throughout the morning, colleagues looked at me differently. Nothing overt, just a flicker of hesitation, a slight pause before greeting me. A couple of whispered conversations stopped abruptly when I approached. I felt like a ghost in my own workplace, present but slightly misaligned. By lunchtime, my anxiety had grown sharp and steady. I needed answers. I needed something concrete to cling to. I decided to retrace steps, mine and the imposter's. First, I stopped at the pharmacy where the cashier had mistaken me a few days earlier. He recognized me immediately. "Oh, hi again," he said with a nervous laugh. "Sorry about the mix-up last time. I swear you have a twin." I forced a smile. "Tell me, the woman you saw, what was she wearing?" He thought for a moment. "A long gray coat and a scarf. Burgundy, I think. Covered most of her face. She kept looking down." The scarf again, my stomach tightened. "And she talked?" I asked. "Not really, just nodded and handed me the stuff. Didn't even take a receipt." A woman who didn't want to leave a trail. My pulse quickened, but the feeling oddly steadied me. Fear had begun turning into focus, clean, sharp, clarifying. If she'd been here, she might have been nearby as well. Maybe she'd gone to other places I frequent. I checked the grocery store, the dry cleaner, even the small bakery a block from my house where I bought muffins every other Sunday. No one had definitive answers, but a few employees hesitated before saying they hadn't seen me lately. Hesitation itself felt like evidence. By late afternoon, I walked through the chilly air toward my car, hands stuffed into my pockets, mind racing. Whoever this woman was, she knew where to find versions of me, my habits, my haunts, the background of my life. She was close enough to mimic the outline of who I was without revealing her face. That meant intention. But intention toward what? My job wasn't high profile. My finances were modest. I led a quiet, almost invisible life. Who would target me? And why in such an intimate way? That night, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea I barely tasted, I forced myself to breathe, to think rationally. Fear could distort everything. I needed to break this into observable facts. Someone resembling me had appeared at my office, someone wearing my coat or an identical one. Someone had visited places I frequented. Someone had allowed others to mistake her for me. Therefore, the woman wasn't avoiding attention, she was using it. The thought chilled me more deeply than anything else. Why use my presence? Why move through the world as me? The more I repeated the questions, the clearer one conclusion became. She wasn't just impersonating me spontaneously. This wasn't random. No, someone had a reason. And if I didn't act soon, the consequences would grow. So I formed my first plan, small but necessary. I would track her appearances, every location, every timestamp, every person who claimed they'd seen me when I hadn't been there. I would document everything. If someone was trying to undermine my identity or steal pieces of my life, I needed a record, an objective timeline to protect myself. I wasn't ready to involve anyone official yet, but I could take a first step. The only way to fight confusion was clarity, and clarity started with keeping score. I opened a new notebook, wrote the date, and made the first entry. March 3rd, imposter seen at office 9:03 a.m. gray coat, face covered, not me. I underlined the last 2 words until the page dented. Tomorrow I would continue. Tomorrow I would find out where else she'd been. By the next morning, I had convinced myself that waiting any longer would only make things worse. I'd filled 2 pages of my notebook with sightings, comments, and inconsistencies. And as much as I wanted to handle this quietly, the truth pressed in from all sides. If someone was impersonating me, I needed a record beyond my own pen and paper. I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The lobby felt too bright, too exposed. Carl greeted me with a cautious nod, as if still unsure how to treat the situation. "I need to speak with someone in security," I said. He didn't question me. He made a call, then directed me upstairs. The building security office was small, 2 desks, a wall of monitors, a faint smell of burnt coffee. A man I'd met once before in passing, Chris Malone, stood up when I entered. Mid-40s, sharp-eyed, polite in a distant way. "Carl told me you wanted to report a concern," he said, offering me a chair. I sat, smoothing my hands over my slacks. "It's unusual, and I'm aware it may sound strange." "That's all right," he replied calmly. "Just tell me what's been happening." So I did, carefully, fact by fact, no embellishments. I described the mistaken greetings, the scarf, the drugstore incident. I told him about the coat, about the video footage from Friday, about the woman whose face remained hidden. Through it all, Chris listened without interrupting, though I noticed the subtle tightening around his mouth. By the time I finished, he leaned back, thinking. "Identity confusion does happen," he said, "but the pattern you're describing is consistent. Too consistent to dismiss." A faint, shaky relief passed through me. At least someone believed the situation was plausible. "I'd like to review the footage myself," he added, "and pull additional angles from Friday morning. If someone entered the elevator bank, there may be clearer shots." "Thank you," I murmured. But as he typed into his system, he frowned. "That's odd." My pulse quickened. "What is?" "The footage from the elevator lobby is missing." A cold weight dropped through my chest. "Missing?" "Not deleted," he clarified. "Just not there." The camera switched off between 8:55 and 9:20. No scheduled maintenance. No logged errors. I stared at him, unable to speak for a moment. "Could that be accidental?" I finally asked. "It's possible," he said, "but unlikely." He stood, walked to another monitor, tapped a few keys, and pulled up a maintenance log. No reports of malfunction, no routine checks. Someone would have needed access to disable that camera manually. I felt the room tilt slightly. Someone had taken steps to ensure the woman wasn't recorded in more detail. Someone had anticipated this. Chris returned to the desk. I'll escalate this to our third-party security vendor. In the meantime, do you feel unsafe? I hesitated. I don't know, but I feel watched. He nodded slowly. If anything else happens, tell me immediately. As I left the office, my legs felt strangely heavy, as if I were walking through water. The hallway looked the same as always, but my perception of it had shifted. The neutral walls, the glass doors, the carpeted floors, now they felt like part of a stage where someone else had walked in my place. That afternoon, things grew even stranger. I received a call on my desk phone from a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before answering. Hello? A pause. Then a woman's voice, low and measured, said, You don't have to keep digging. I froze. Who is this? Another pause. Just let it go. It's better that way. Before I could respond, the line clicked dead. I sat motionless, gripping the receiver, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't coincidence. Someone was aware of my actions. Someone felt threatened by them. I reported the call to Chris immediately. He traced the number. It came from a prepaid phone, unregistered, untraceable. Could be a prank, he offered, though his voice lacked conviction. I left work early, unable to concentrate. Outside, the wind felt sharp against my face. I walked to my car quickly, glancing over my shoulder more than once, hating that I was doing it and hating even more that it felt necessary. But the day wasn't done with me yet. When I got home, there was an envelope wedged under my front door. Plain, white, no address. My breath hitched. I picked it up with trembling fingers and opened it inside, under the warm yellow light of my kitchen. Inside was a single piece of paper, a printed screenshot, my signature on a form I had never seen, a supply requisition from my office, my full name, my handwriting, except it wasn't. The curve of the letters was almost perfect, but slightly too smooth, too controlled, like someone had practiced repeatedly. Someone was forging me. At the bottom of the page was a note typed in small, cold letters. Stop before this becomes harder for you. My knees weakened. I sank into a chair, the paper rattling in my hands. This was no longer just impersonation. It was interference. Deliberate, targeted, escalating. I stared at the forged signature again and felt something shift inside me. Fear was still there, strong and immediate, but underneath it something else rose. Something steadier, harder, determination. This wasn't the time to shrink back. Whoever was doing this had planned carefully, but they had also made a mistake. They had given me proof. Real proof. I folded the paper carefully, slid it into a folder, and placed it with my growing notes. There was no turning back now. Someone had stepped into my life. Someone thought they could push me aside quietly. They underestimated me. Tomorrow I would take the next step. Tomorrow I would not be alone with this anymore. The forged signature changed something in me. Fear didn't disappear, but it reorganized itself, became sharper, cleaner, more functional. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing. The next morning, I scanned every document in my folder. My handwritten notes, the screenshot of the forgery, the timeline of mistaken sightings, and copied everything onto a flash drive. I encrypted the files not because I thought I needed to, but because the act of protecting them gave me a sense of control I desperately needed. Then I went back to the security office. Chris looked tired, as if he'd been turning my case over in his mind, too. When I set the folder on his desk, he flipped through the pages with tightening eyebrows. "You're certain you didn't sign this?" he asked, tapping the forged requisition form. "Positive. The curve of the M is wrong. Mine is sharper at the top." He nodded slowly. "This isn't amateur work. Someone studied your handwriting." The confirmation sent a chill through me, but it also validated what I already knew. This was deliberate. This was targeted. "I want to pull all my access logs," I said. "Every badge swipe, every login for the past 3 weeks. He raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. "All right, we can check that." For the next hour, we went through every digital trace tied to my name. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then we found it. A login to the internal project portal under my username, time-stamped at 9:14 a.m. on the same morning the woman in the gray coat entered the building. "I was home," I said, leaning closer to the screen. "I know. Could someone have guessed my password?" "It's possible. Or someone could have watched you enter it at some point." He paused. "Or someone with admin-level access could have overridden the credential." I stared at him. "Meaning someone inside?" His silence was answer enough. The room felt suddenly smaller. Before leaving, I asked Chris, "Is anyone else aware you're looking into this?" He hesitated. A barely noticeable pause, but a pause all the same. "Only my supervisor," he said carefully, and he was the one who said to keep things quiet for now. Quiet. The word sat wrong with me. Still, I thanked him and left the office. I had more to check. I drove to the branch of my bank where I'd opened my accounts years ago. The banker, a polite young woman named Allison, greeted me with her usual warmth. But when I asked whether there had been any unusual activity, her expression shifted into something more formal. "There was a login attempt from an unfamiliar device," she said, scanning her screen. 3 days ago. It didn't go through, but it triggered a temporary hold. You didn't receive a text?" "No," I said quietly. "No text." She frowned. "The number on file is the one ending in 13? "That's my number," I confirmed. She hesitated. "Sometimes carriers fail to deliver alerts, but I can reset your security settings." "Please do." As she worked, I sat perfectly still, hands clasped tightly in my lap. First my workplace, now my bank. Someone was closing in from multiple angles, testing doors, pushing boundaries. The impersonation wasn't random. It was a strategy, one designed to destabilize me. When I left the bank, the cold wind stung my face. I walked through the parking lot slowly, scanning the area not because I feared being followed, but because hyper-awareness had become a survival instinct. The escalation came that evening. I was slicing vegetables for dinner when my doorbell rang. The sound startled me enough that I nearly dropped the knife. I checked the peephole. A woman stood on my porch. Tall, mid-40s, dark coat. Eyes sharp in that way people have when they're accustomed to sizing up a room before entering it. I didn't recognize her. I opened the door only a few inches. "Yes?" "You're Margaret Cole," she said. "Not a question." "I am. I work for the legal department of your firm." My stomach tightened. "You're not from our legal department." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "No, but you're making enough noise that we thought you should hear a friendly warning." The words hit me like a slap. "Who is we?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She leaned slightly forward, not threateningly, but with the quiet confidence of someone who believed she had the upper hand. "Stop the inquiries, stop the reports, let it go." I felt my anger rise clean and steady. Or what? Or your professional reputation will suffer in ways you won't be able to fix. Her tone remained calm. People already doubt your reliability. One more misstep, and those doubts will solidify. A perfect measured threat. Who sent you? I asked. She smiled again, this time colder. No one sends me, but some people prefer stability, and your recent behavior is becoming inconvenient. I held her gaze. Get off my property! For a moment, she didn't move, as if testing whether I would break eye contact. Then she stepped back. This is your last chance to walk away. Good night, I said firmly and shut the door. I locked it, then double-checked the deadbolt. My hands trembled only after she was gone. The next morning, I met again with Chris, who looked alarmed when I described the encounter. That woman is not affiliated with us, he said. Are you sure she said she worked in legal? She implied it, I said. She wanted me to stop. This is turning into something else, he murmured. Something bigger than impersonation. I swallowed hard. I'm not backing down. He nodded. Then you need to be careful. For the next 3 days, I stayed mostly home. I told Denise I needed personal time, and she didn't question it. I watered my plants. I cooked simple meals. I sat on my couch with a blanket around my shoulders, trying to quiet my mind enough to think. Fear still lived in me, but it no longer dictated my choices. Instead, I felt a steady focus, a cooling of the nerves, as if my body instinctively understood that the only way through this was forward. The woman in the gray coat, the forged signature, the disabled camera, the phone call, the stranger on my porch. Pieces of a whole I could almost see but not yet name. I needed clarity. I needed allies. I needed a plan that couldn't be derailed by threats or half-truths. Resting didn't mean retreat. It meant gathering strength for what came next. The 3 days I spent at home were quieter than I expected. Not peaceful, just quiet like the air before a storm decides which direction to turn. I kept waiting for another knock at the door, another anonymous call, another envelope shoved under the frame. But nothing happened, which somehow unsettled me more. On the 4th morning, I felt steady enough to step outside. I took a short walk around the neighborhood, the early chill waking my senses. For a brief stretch, everything looked painfully normal. Cars warming up, a dog barking behind a fence, the faint smell of someone's coffee drifting down the street. Normal life still existed. Mine just sat at the edge of it, half-shadowed. When I returned home, there was a voicemail on my phone. A soft beep, then a female voice. Polite, velvety, almost soothing. Margaret, this is Emily from HR. We heard you've been dealing with some confusion and stress. If you'd like, we can arrange a meeting to clarify a few misunderstandings. No pressure. We just want you to feel supported. Her tone suggested concern, but something beneath the softness felt too careful, too rehearsed. HR never contacted employees proactively unless something was severely amiss. I didn't call back. 2 hours later, I received an email from Denise, my manager. Short, neutral. If you're available tomorrow, legal can provide clarity about recent incidents. They've requested to speak directly with you. Let me know if you'd like me to walk with you. Legal, again. And clarity. A loaded word. It told me everything I needed to know. They wanted me calm, compliant, and above all, quiet. But their timing was revealing. The woman on my porch hadn't scared me into silence. So now came the next tactic, inviting me to step back into line under the guise of support. an easier path, a way out. I deleted the message, but not before saving a copy to my flash drive. That evening, I sat at my dining table, the folder of evidence beside me, and forced myself to think with cold precision. If they wanted to smooth things over, it wasn't because they cared about my stress. It was because I was getting close to something they didn't want exposed. The sudden silence, the orchestrated friendliness, it all felt like someone had switched strategies. Fear hadn't worked. Maybe cooperation would. At least that was what they hoped. But I'd already made my choice. The house felt too still again, so I reached for my phone. There was one person I trusted enough to talk to, my former co-worker, Helen. She'd retired 3 years earlier, but still lived in town. We weren't close in the everyday sense, but she'd always been grounded, clear-headed, perceptive. I dialed her number before I could talk myself out of it. She answered on the second ring. "Margaret, it's been ages!" Her voice carried the warmth of someone who genuinely remembers you. When I asked if she had time to meet, she didn't hesitate. Of course. Where? We chose a small cafe halfway between us, a place she'd always liked. I drove there with a tightness in my chest that eased only when I saw her standing by the entrance, wrapped in her navy coat, gray hair pulled neatly back. The moment we sat down, she studied my face. "You look pale. What's going on?" I hesitated, then opened my folder. I didn't show her everything, just the forged document and a brief outline of the impersonation. Helen listened with the same steady attentiveness she'd shown back when we worked together. She didn't interrupt. She didn't question my memory. She didn't offer comforting lies. When I finished, she leaned back, exhaling slowly. "This isn't confusion, Margaret. This is a deliberate pattern." The relief that washed over me was so sudden it made my eyes sting. I blinked hard, clearing the blur. "You believe me," I said quietly. "Of course I do." She gestured to the photocopied form. "That signature alone proves someone's trying to insert themselves into your records, and the fact that HR and legal want a conversation means they're aware something is circulating." "I think someone's watching my movements," I admitted. "You're being targeted," Helen corrected gently. "Different thing, more precise." She sipped her tea, thinking. "Whoever is behind this expects you to panic. They expect you to doubt yourself. And when fear didn't work, they shifted to kindness." I sat back, surprised at how accurately she saw the pattern. "Don't meet with HR or legal alone," she continued. "If they insist, bring representation or request everything in writing." Her voice was calm, grounded in practical experience. It steadied me in a way nothing else had in days. For the first time since the imposter walked into my building, I felt not just determined, but supported. Before we parted, Helen added, "Don't let them isolate you. That's the goal. Stay connected." Her words echoed in my mind as I drove home. The following morning, a single text appeared on my phone around 8:12 a.m. "We can make this stop. Just talk to us. No more tension, no more mistakes." No name, no number saved. Just a message written with calculated gentleness. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I deleted it and blocked the number. If they were watching, they knew now. I wasn't going to be softened, coaxed, or lured into submission, but they didn't reach out again that day, or the next. A strange sense of calm settled over me. Not safety, just calm, like the surface of a lake that hides something moving beneath. I kept documenting everything. I kept resting. I kept thinking. And I kept Helen's words close. Stay connected. For the first time since this began, I didn't feel alone in the fight. Someone believed me. Someone was in my corner. And that changed everything. Because with even one person behind you, the world stops feeling like it's collapsing inward. It expands, even if only by an inch. When the next knock finally came, I was ready. The knock came late in the afternoon, just as the sun dipped low enough to cast long stripes across my living room floor. I didn't flinch this time. I stood, walked to the door, and checked the peephole. 2 people, a man and a woman, both dressed in business casual, both wearing thin professional smiles that didn't reach their eyes. I opened the door only halfway. "Ms. Cole?" the woman asked, her voice syrupy, as if she had practiced a tone of concern. "We're from the corporate liaison team. We heard you had questions and wanted to offer clarity." Another clarity. The word stuck to them like a badge. The man stepped forward slightly. "We're here to help smooth things over. No need for tension or formalities." Their timing told me everything. Someone had clearly reported that I'd spoken with security, that I wasn't backing down, that I'd begun asking the right questions. "I'm not interested in smoothing anything over," I said calmly. "If you have something official, send it through email." The woman gave a little laugh, soft and patronizing. "Email can be so easily misinterpreted. We just want to talk face to face, to keep small misunderstandings from becoming unfortunate." Unfortunate sat in the air like a threat with a velvet ribbon tied around it. I kept my face neutral. "I'm not available." They exchanged a glance, quick, tight, controlled. The man tried next. "We understand you've been under a lot of stress lately. Seeing things out of context, feeling overwhelmed, these things happen. People worry." There it was, the suggestion I was unwell. It angered me, but the anger was cold, anchored. "I don't need a wellness check," I said. "I need you off my porch." He gave a tiny sigh. Disappointed, performative. "Margaret, this can all be resolved quietly. There's no need for escalation. No need to involve people who don't understand the nuances." "The nuances," I repeated. "Is that what you call forgery now?" Their polite expressions flickered. Only for a second, but enough. So they knew, or at least suspected. The woman tried again, gentler this time, like she was speaking to a child who might cry. "Let us in. We can talk through this. We want what's best for you." I didn't move. "What's best for me is not behind you." Her smile dropped, and something sharp appeared in its place. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "I'm sure I am," I said. "Good night." I went to shut the door, but the man placed his hand lightly, not forcefully, against the frame. "Think carefully," he said softly. "You're close to crossing a line that will be difficult to walk back from." "I've already crossed it," I replied, the moment someone walked into my office building pretending to be me. He didn't remove his hand. His eyes narrowed, studying me the way someone assesses a lock they haven't yet picked. Then the woman touched his arm. "Let it go," she murmured. "She's made up her mind." Reluctantly, he stepped back. I closed the door and locked it. Only then did I notice my hands had begun shaking, not with panic, but with adrenaline. I leaned against the wood for a long moment, breathing slowly until my pulse steadied. They had come in pairs this time, polished, prepared, armed with rehearsed lines designed to confuse me, guilt me, pressure me. But I hadn't cracked. And that realization settled inside me like a weight shifting into the right place. The next morning, I forced myself to go back to the office. Not because I wanted to be there, but because fear had a way of shrinking your world if you let it. And I refused to live small. People glanced at me when I walked through the lobby. I couldn't tell whether the looks were curious wary, or a mix of both. It didn't matter anymore. I went straight to my desk, opened my laptop, and began reviewing old emails, specifically messages tied to project access or administrative requests. If someone had been forging my signature, perhaps they had also been tampering with communications. Half an hour in, Denise appeared beside my desk. She held a to-go coffee and wore an expression that hovered between concern and cautious distance. "Margaret, do you have a moment?" I gestured for her to sit. She didn't. "We've had reports that you've been under pressure recently," she said carefully. "If you need accommodations or want to step back from certain responsibilities, we can work something out." This was another version of the same tactic. "You're overwhelmed. You're imagining patterns. We're only trying to help." I met her eyes. "I don't need accommodations. I need the company to stop letting people impersonate me." She stiffened slightly. "I can't speak to that. But I do want to remind you that spreading unverified concerns can—" "Denise," I said softly, "I know someone logged into my account while I was home. I know security footage is missing. I know someone forged my signature." Her jaw tightened so subtly most people wouldn't notice. "I'm trying to help you," she whispered. "No," I said, "you're trying to contain me." Her breath caught. Just a flicker, but I saw it. She straightened. "If you choose not to cooperate, that's your decision. But there are internal processes, and they will proceed without your input." I nodded once. "Then let them." She left without another word. The mask had slipped. Just a bit, but enough to show me the truth. She wasn't neutral. She wasn't oblivious. She was already involved. After work, I met Helen at the same cafe as before. She took one look at my face and said, "So they tried to pressure you. 2 of them, on my porch." She exhaled sharply. "They're escalating." I nodded. "And they're losing patience." Helen leaned closer. "That's good." I frowned. "How's that good?" "Because it means they don't have full control anymore. When people get desperate, they stop coordinating. They make mistakes." Her voice was calm, solid, a lifeline. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently. I thought about it. The fear under my ribs, the tremor in my hands, the relentless tension of waiting for another intrusion. "I'm scared," I admitted, "but the fear isn't stopping me anymore." "It shouldn't," she said. "You're closer to the truth than they want you to be." Her certainty steadied something deep inside me. As I drove home that evening, I felt the fear shift again, not fading, but transforming into something useful, something that sharpened my attention rather than muddling it. Yes, they were watching me. Yes, they were pushing. Yes, they wanted me to surrender. But they had shown their weakest point. They needed me quiet. And that was exactly why I would not be. By the following week, something inside me had crystallized. The fear was still there, but it no longer dictated what I did. Instead, it sharpened my focus, like a lens being adjusted until everything came into sudden clarity. If they needed me quiet, I would make them speak. I began with the simplest piece of leverage I had: documentation. Everything that had happened, every forgery, every call, every sighting, every visit, I organized into a single chronological packet. I cross-referenced timestamps, attached scans, added annotations. I even printed stills from the video showing the imposter in my coat. When I showed the stack to Helen over coffee, she nodded approvingly. "This is exactly what they don't want you to have. It's time to show it to someone who can't ignore it," I said. She studied me, then asked, "Who?" I hesitated, then answered, Our third-party legal compliance officer, the one the company has to cooperate with by law. Helen smiled, small and grim. Now that is a solid move. The next morning, with the packet in my bag and a steady coldness in my chest, I walked into the building. I didn't stop at my desk. I didn't stop at the security office. Instead, I went straight to the 6th floor where the compliance team held weekly rotations. I found the current officer, Daniel Crow, at a temporary workstation reviewing contracts. He looked up, surprised when I introduced myself. "Do you have a moment?" I asked, my voice even. "I have evidence of internal misconduct related to identity interference." That got his full attention. We sat in a small conference room. I placed the packet on the table and slid it toward him. "I need you to read everything," I said. "And I need you to understand that this isn't hypothetical. It's happening inside this building." He raised an eyebrow but opened the folder. For the next 20 minutes, the room was silent except for the faint rustle of pages. As he read, I watched his expressions shift. Confusion first, then concern, then something sharper. When he reached the forged signature, he let out a low breath. "This is serious," he said. "Very serious." "I know." He tapped the requisition form. "This alone violates 3 internal protocols, and the missing camera footage, if accurate, indicates deliberate interference." "It is accurate," I said. He nodded. "I need to verify independently, but yes, you were right to bring this to me." A small cold satisfaction spread through me. Someone had finally taken my reality and placed it in theirs. Then he added, "And Margaret, whoever orchestrated this will not be able to contain it now." Exactly what I wanted to hear. The effect was immediate. By midday, a whisper rippled through the office. People looked at me differently, not with suspicion anymore, but with unease, as if they sensed something shifting behind the scenes. Around 2 o'clock, Denise appeared at my desk. She didn't ask to talk. She didn't smile. She simply said, "Compliance has requested documentation from our department. Did you go to them directly?" "Yes," I said. She exhaled sharply. "That was highly inappropriate." "No," I corrected calmly. "Forgery and impersonation are highly inappropriate. Reporting them is not." For the first time since this began, she looked rattled, her composure slipping, her voice too tight. "You don't understand how this makes the department look. It's not my job to protect appearances." Her jaw tightened. "You should have spoken to me first." "I did," I said. "You tried to silence me." She flinched. An involuntary reaction she immediately tried to hide. Then she said something that shocked me by how revealing it was. "You don't know what you're doing." I looked at her steadily. "I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm protecting myself." She opened her mouth to respond, then shut it. Without another word, she turned and walked away quickly, almost too quickly. She was losing control, all of them were. Later that afternoon, I found myself alone in the break room. The hum of the refrigerator and the quiet clink of my teacup were the only sounds. For a moment, I felt almost peaceful. Then the door opened. The woman who had visited my porch stepped inside. She looked different here. Smaller, without the advantage of a staged visit or a dramatic entrance. But her eyes were the same. Sharp, calculating. "So," she said, "you really did go to compliance." "Yes," I replied calmly. She studied me for a long moment. "Do you know what you've set in motion?" "Yes." "And you're prepared for the fallout?" "Yes." Her gaze flickered, and for the first time I saw something raw in her expression. Uncertainty. She stepped closer, not threatening but deliberate, as if trying to reclaim the power she'd lost. "You're making a mistake," she said softly. "You think exposing this will protect you, but it will only make things harder." "I'm not the one who should be worried," I said. Her nostrils flared. Her voice dropped to a hiss. "You don't understand who you're dealing with." "I understand more than you think." She held my stare, waiting for me to crumble or doubt myself, but I didn't. Finally, she exhaled sharply, as if frustrated by my refusal to bend. "You should have taken the easy way out." "There was never an easy way," I said. She stepped back. Her shoulders rose and fell with slow, deliberate breaths. Then, with a tight, almost trembling voice, she said, "You've just made yourself a problem, and you've just confirmed you're involved." That struck her like a slap. Her face paled. She opened her mouth, maybe to deny it, but no words came out. She turned and stormed out of the room. I watched the door close behind her and realized that, for the first time, she'd shown something real, fear, and not mine. When I left the office that evening, the air felt different, charged, like the few seconds before lightning touches ground. I knew the hardest moment was still ahead, the final confrontation, the point where the truth would no longer stay contained. But I also knew this: they were unraveling, and I was no longer afraid of them. Not the way I had been, not the way they counted on. The investigation moved faster than I expected. By the next morning, compliance had already scheduled interviews, requested badge logs, and ordered a full audit of the camera system. The tension in the office was palpable. People whispered in hallways, doors closed more quickly, and the air carried the charged heaviness of something irreversible. I arrived at my desk to find an email from Daniel Crow. "Please meet me at 10 a.m. in conference room 3B. Bring any additional documentation." I read it twice. Calmly, this was happening. At 10 sharp, I walked into the conference room. Daniel sat across from two other compliance officers, their laptops open, their expressions serious. A recorder blinked quietly between them. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Cole," Daniel began. "Before we start, I want you to know we've already confirmed several discrepancies you reported." He slid a printout toward me. "Badge access logs. 2 entries under my name, one at 9:03 a.m., one at 9:14 a.m., both marked as authenticated. Both of these occurred while you were logged into your home network," Daniel said. "VPN confirms your location." I nodded, feeling a tightness in my chest loosen slightly. So someone spoofed my credentials, or someone with administrative access forced a manual override, the second officer added. Another sheet slid toward me, camera maintenance logs. "The 6th floor camera outage," Daniel said, "was intentionally triggered. Someone with security credentials disabled it remotely at 8:54 a.m. and re-enabled it," the other officer said, "at 9:20, as soon as the impersonator reached your department floor." The pieces were no longer pieces. They were a pattern with edges too sharp to ignore. "We have reason to believe," Daniel said carefully, "that someone inside the company facilitated the impersonation." A knock interrupted us. The door opened. Denise stepped inside. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Eyes dull, shoulders tight, hands clasped to hide their trembling. "Ms. Cole, please," Daniel said. "Sit." She did, though she avoided my eyes. Daniel cleared his throat. "We've reviewed the documentation from Ms. Cole. Some of the irregularities, the forged requisition forms, the login anomalies, originate from your department." I can explain that," Denise said quickly. "There must have been a misunderstanding." Her voice sounded brittle. "Did you authorize the requisition request under Ms. Cole's name?" Daniel asked. No, she said too fast. Of course not. Why would I? He slid the forged form toward her. Her jaw tightened. This looks nothing like her signature. It looks enough like it, I said coldly. Denise flinched. Daniel continued. We've traced the digital file metadata. It was created on your assistant's workstation. My assistant wouldn't. He told us you asked him to process a backlog manually, Daniel said. He assumed it was routine. Her face drained of color. This is being blown out of proportion, she whispered. It's administrative clutter, not misconduct. And the woman impersonating Miss Cole? I asked. My voice was steady, almost unnervingly calm. Denise swallowed hard. I don't know anything about that. Daniel slid another printout across the table. A security still. Not of the imposter, of the woman who came to my porch. Walking into our building 2 weeks earlier, signing in as a consultant, using Denise's visitor authorization code. The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel clasped his hands. Do you want to amend your previous statement? Denise's eyes darted toward the door, then toward me. You don't understand, she whispered. I was trying to protect the department. There were concerns about your reliability, and I was told. Told by whom? Daniel asked sharply. She hesitated. That single hesitation sealed her fate. Daniel leaned back. We are suspending you effective immediately. HR will escort you out after this meeting. Her mouth fell open. You can't do that. We already have. The second compliance officer stood. There will be a full internal review. We strongly recommend you cooperate. Denise finally turned to me. For a brief moment, I saw something raw. Anger, panic, humiliation all tangled together. This is your fault, she hissed quietly. No, I said. This is yours. Her eyes burned with something wild, but she said nothing else as she was escorted out. After the door closed, Daniel turned back to me. We're not done, he said. But I want to assure you, Miss Cole, this was not your imagination. You were targeted. I breathed out slowly. What happens next? We've already flagged the visitor code used by the outside consultant. We'll be contacting her as well. And based on the severity of what we've uncovered, the company will likely pursue external legal action. And the impersonator? He nodded. We have her image from the lobby camera. We'll identify her. I felt a strange heaviness lift from my shoulders. Not victory. Something quieter, steadier. Relief backed by proof. We'll keep you informed, Daniel said. And for what it's worth, you handled this better than most people would have. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet, but the room felt brighter. Someone had finally said it out loud. I was right. As I walked back to my desk, people glanced up. Their eyes held a different weight now, not doubt, but something closer to respect, or maybe guilt. I passed the break room and saw the porch woman standing inside, her arms crossed tightly. For a moment, our eyes met through the glass. She looked cornered. She turned away quickly and hurried down the hall. Not a word, not a threat, not a warning. They were done pretending, and they were losing. That evening, when I stepped outside, the air tasted sharp and clean. The sky looked wider than it had in weeks. For the first time since that day, Carl said he'd seen me when he hadn't. I felt safe. Not because the danger was gone, but because it was exposed, visible, containable. They had tried to wear my coat, my routine, my identity, but they had underestimated the one thing they couldn't imitate, my resolve. In the weeks after the investigation, my life slowly shifted out of the tight, breathless tension I'd been living in. Not all at once. Nothing ever resolves that neatly, but gradually, like a room brightening as someone lifts a shade inch by inch. There were still meetings, still documents to sign, still follow-ups from compliance. But the tone had changed. Now people approached me with respect, not suspicion. They spoke carefully, thoughtfully, as if aware they'd underestimated me. I didn't relish their discomfort. I just observed it with a quiet clarity. The truth settles differently when it's forced into daylight. The first real sign of change came 2 weeks later when Daniel called me into a follow-up meeting. "We've identified the woman who impersonated you," he said. "Her name is Laura Jensen. She was contracted through a third-party vendor your department recently used." I felt a slow, steady pulse beneath my ribs. "And her connection to Denise?" "Direct," he replied. "Emails between them suggest Denise recruited her unofficially to streamline workflow issues, though the language is intentionally vague. Of course, nothing criminal, just unethical, just manipulative, just enough to sabotage someone's standing without leaving fingerprints." "What's happening to them now?" I asked. "The company terminated both," Daniel said, "and we've forwarded all documentation to the board's legal counsel. There may be formal claims." "What about the forged signature?" "That alone is grounds for civil action," he said, "but that's up to you." I nodded. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to think about lawsuits. My goal hadn't been revenge, it had been truth. Still, hearing the outcome made something inside me finally unclench. They were out, gone, removed from the spaces they used to control. Word spread quickly through the office. People's behavior toward me shifted again, less tentative, more open. A few apologized quietly, saying they should have listened sooner. Others simply treated me with a newfound caution, as if they'd seen what I was capable of and didn't want to be on the wrong side of it. I didn't hold grudges, but I remembered. The world becomes clearer when masks fall away. My daily life changed in small, unassuming ways. I stopped checking over my shoulder each time I parked. I slept through the night without jolting awake at imagined footsteps. I started cooking again. Simple meals, but enough to fill the house with warm smells. One morning, I realized something so ordinary it startled me. I was humming while getting dressed. I hadn't done that in months. Helen and I met regularly. Our conversations spilled from crisis management into ordinary things. Her garden, my plans for spring, shows we both pretended not to be addicted to. We sat in the same booth at the cafe, and each time I felt more like myself than I had in a long time. "You've changed," she said once, stirring sugar into her tea. "Good or bad?" I asked. "Stronger," she answered, "and calmer, like someone who finally trusts her own instincts." I smiled. I suppose I learned the hard way. Helen tilted her head. "You learned the real way. That's what matters." Her words stayed with me. A month later, the company held a mandatory meeting to address recent breaches in internal protocol. They never named names, but everyone knew. Policies were rewritten, oversight tightened, visitor access codes restricted. Managers received training on proper boundaries. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had tried to erase me. Now my ordeal was shaping the rules they had to follow. After the meeting, Carl from security approached me shyly. "I just wanted to say," he murmured, "I'm sorry, I should have questioned things sooner." I shook my head. "You did what you could, and you helped when it mattered." He looked relieved. "If you ever need anything, I'm here." I believed him. Meanwhile, the fallout for Denise was harsher than I expected. I saw the article online one morning while drinking tea. Nothing dramatic, just a short mention in a business newsletter about a mid-level manager dismissed for breach of professional ethics involving improper delegation to outside contractors. Public enough to sting, permanent enough to follow her. Her accomplice, the woman from my porch, lost her consulting license. She'd tried to file a complaint against the company, but with the documentation Daniel and I provided, her case fell apart. She faded from the professional sphere as quickly as she'd entered it. Consequences, real ones, unavoidable. Not vengeance, just balance. As for me, I began reclaiming the rhythms of my life, but they weren't the same rhythms as before. I took longer walks. I let myself linger in stores without scanning the faces around me. I bought a new plant, a tall, quiet ficus that settled naturally near my window, as if it belonged there. I also replaced my gray coat. The old one, with its coffee stain and missing button, felt tainted, too entwined with someone else's hands, someone else's intentions. The new coat was deep green, warm, sturdy, entirely mine. A small but deliberate act of renewal. One afternoon, as I walked out of the building, the winter air cool against my face, I realized something else had changed too. I no longer needed to hurry to my car. I no longer felt watched. I no longer worried about someone stepping into my shadow. My life had space again, room to breathe, room to grow, and I wasn't afraid of filling it. Not anymore. In the sanctuary of my quiet home, I sometimes paused by the folder containing the evidence, the printouts, the notes, the forged forms. I kept it in a desk drawer, tucked neatly but not hidden. A reminder, not of what happened, but of what I survived, of what I uncovered, of what I refused to let continue, and of the truth I'd fought for even when no one else wanted to see it. Now, when I think back to the woman in my coat, walking through my building with her face hidden, I don't feel the old fear. I feel something closer to clarity. She tried to wear my life like an outfit she could slip in and out of. But a life isn't a coat. It can't be borrowed. It can't be forged. It can't be entered on a visitor pass. A life is built from choices, steady, deliberate, and earned. And I had reclaimed mine. One step, one document, one truth at a time. That's how it happened. That's how I took my life back piece by piece until the truth stood on its own legs. But now I want to ask you something. If someone walked into your world wearing your coat, your name, your routine, if someone tried to replace you in the quiet corners of your own life, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. I read them all. If this story kept you on edge, make sure you're subscribed. There are more true-to-life psychological tales waiting for you on this channel. Thank you for staying with me. We're in this together.